All right, so I've got a slide here where I'm going to talk about the legacy look 5, 6 years ago at an installation, and my next slide is going to be, okay, so how does it look when we pivot to resilience? So, historically our programs were focused on efficiency and conservation, and I would suggest a key driver were those sorts of things, as well as a certain federal mandates for efficiencies and cost savings. We were focused on that sorts of stuff. So when we went out and did an assessment on installations, we were focused on buildings with a large, that were very large, right, or that consumed a lot of energy. We would also look at opportunities to offset the usage, maybe with some on-site renewable generation, and maybe we did some demand response sorts of stuff. But one of the basic things is we weren't really thinking much about risk to our systems, right? We weren't thinking about risk. We weren't thinking in terms of, well, jeepers, what the heck is critical at this installation, what is not as critical. We were focused on the big facilities, the ones that consume lots of energy and water. So the sorts of solutions that historically came out of this was building level load management strategies, conservation measures, again, maybe some renewable generation. Energy conservation measures, lighting retrofits, heating, ventilating, air conditioning modifications, setbacks, maybe we replaced windows, added insulation, stuff like that. So we were probably thinking in terms of cost effectiveness. We probably racked and stacked the various things that we wanted to do based on payback, and the things that paid back the quickest we were probably most interested in versus the ones that were the longest. Not to say that this is still not important, but I would suggest that this has got to be woven in to this singular focus on resilience. Okay, so now let's go to the next slide, and I know there's a couple of things you can't see here on the screen. Okay, so we're focused on resilience, but conservation and efficiency, still matter, but they're part of a nuanced picture of how our installations support the warfighter. So, what we need to do today now is our assessments are focused on first of all, we've got to understand the critical mission requirements at an installation. Okay, not an easy thing to do. Army installations are very large with typically thousands of facilities. There are multiple missions. All right, but we need to use the chain of command. You've got one garrison commander and you have one senior commander, okay? So we're really going to have to depend on that senior commander to define what the heck is critical, because I bet you there will be a bunch of senior civilians and lieutenant colonels and colonels that all think whatever they're doing is critical. And at the end of the day, everything can't be critical. And there's got to be what's really critical to support the fight and what's not. So when we go out and assess now, we need to focus on what's critical. So what is on this chart, which those of you, I'm sure many of you can't see, and there's a red dashed line that highlights things like the Network Enterprise Center, hospital, operations headquarters, and motor pool. So those sorts of things are probably going to be critical. But now we're looking at the risks to everything that's connected there, because we're really concerned about risk, and we need to consider all the different threats that are out there. The physical, the natural, the cyber. All right, so what's fast forwarding? What the heck kinds of stuff are we going to come up with our focus being resilience, not efficiency sorts of things. So we might now come up with some investments that integrate and provide redundancy to critical requirements. So for instance, in the old days, we probably didn't care how many feeds an installation had for its electricity. We probably didn't even think about it. If we thought about it, we didn't care. Now we probably care about that. We probably don't want just a single prime electricity feed to an installation. We probably want at least two. And we don't want them on the same pole. We want them physically separated. We're now concerned about the ability to move electricity around an installation. What I've seen at some Army installations is, hey, we got two feeds. One comes in on the east, the other comes in on the west. Guess what? The installation seems to have been laid out into 2 half moons. So when this feed goes out, you can't take the feed from the other side and bring it around to the installation. So from a resilience standpoint, that's now kind of an important thing. Again, when you're thinking efficiency, you quite frankly didn't even think about that. Things like storage and controls to allow on-site generation, microgrids become very important. It's wonderful to have an on-site generation source. It could be renewable. It could be natural gas, like Fort Knox has, and maybe some other places in the future will have that. But now you just can't have a generation asset. You need to be able to, if it's renewable, you need to be able to have some storage capability, or it's not really going to do a whole lot for you 24/7. And you need to have the ability to move stuff around and control loads. So now you're talking a microgrid. Backup generation. I don't think anybody would have thought about looking at backup generation when we were focused on efficiency, because that was just backup generation. Well, now when you're concerned about resilience and you're focused on that and you want to keep the power running to these really critical facilities, and there's different flavors of critical facilities. There's one set of critical facilities that cannot withstand a blip ever. Okay, so on those you're going to want to have grid power with an uninterruptible power system with a really good backup capability that can run however long that mission requires. It could be a day, it could be 30 days, whatever is required. There are other critical facilities that can probably withstand a blip of some sort, so maybe there you don't need an uninterruptible power system, but you want a backup gen set. Maybe they can withstand 10 seconds, a minute, an hour, but but things would degrade real quick if they do not have backup generation after that. So so cost obviously is still a consideration. So that's where all this smart stuff from the legacy look of efficiency and reducing demand and all that sorts of stuff, demand response, continue to make sense. But how we prioritize what comes out of this now is going to be very different. We're going to prioritize things that based on how they reduce that risk, okay, not cost. All right, so that's what the pivot's all about. So in some ways, it's not that hard, but if you start going down the wrong road, you're not going to get there. I would suggest if you go down the road of being focused on resilience, that's what you need to do. Don't worry, you're going to get to the efficiency, cost control sorts of things. But when we rack and stack the priorities, they're just not going to rack and stack high. What's going to rack and stack high might be that second feed, that second physically separated feed, for the electricity system, or maybe tying in your substation so you can move electricity around the installation, with the focus being only the critical facilities. I'm sorry, but I don't believe the Army's ever going to have enough money to take care of everything. So if we can't take care of everything, we've got to take care of the critical. And I have not yet come up with with Army words on this. So those here in the Army, if later on you want to catch me and you could give me the Army equivalent of this, but the Navy SEALs have a famous saying about how to eat an elephant: one bite at a time. Okay, and I think that's very applicable to the Army, because the Army's a big place, a lot of installations. The installations are really big. We can't go after everything on an installation. Like Redstone, we can't go after everything at Redstone. We gotta focus on the critical, get the critical done, and if we can still have more ability to get more stuff done, then fine. Then we start working off off the other stuff. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, a little bit about energy resilience exercises. So we've actually been doing some total installation exercises here, where we've actually completely unplugged them now in a totally planned manner. We've had the help of MIT Lincoln Labs for Stewart and Greeley, and I'm not picking on these installations. I actually congratulate them for doing this. I would suggest that the kinds of things that I'm going to point out here exist at every single installation, without a doubt. I'll tell you the bottom line. The bottom line is you can't really determine what's going to work and what's not going to work unless you actually do the test. I would challenge the electrical engineers and the electricians. I'll give you all the blueprints. I bet you our blueprints aren't accurate. Surprise, surprise, right? I mean, but I'll let you crawl through the buildings, and I bet you will not be able to guarantee me that everything is going to work. So we've got to really do these exercises to test what really happens and what's not going to happen. So last June, this happens to be Stewart. I am not picking on them. I'm congratulating them for doing this. So they shut off electrical power in a totally planned, hands-on. They knew it. They knew it for 6-8 months ahead of time. They went out and did preventive maintenance. They did all sorts of stuff to try to ensure that things were going to work. The generator, as far as backup generators, 5 of 91 failed pretty quickly, so that's not too bad. But the generator supporting the hospital failed after 55 minutes. So the hospital had to, exercise for the hospital had to be immediately halted, and that circuit had to be re-energized. I would think that people would, or that our installations would be able to keep after the generator supporting a hospital compared to the generator supporting something not as important. Another thing that happened is this is the one where maybe 20 years ago you had this mission critical facility and everything had been put together right, and the critical circuit stuff that needed to be powered was plugged into the critical circuits, and the stuff that wasn't as important were plugged into the non-critical circuits within the facility. Well, as it turns out, when grid power is on, everything is working, and that's hunky-dory. This building that I'm talking about had an uninterruptible power system. So the grid power was lost, so the uninterruptible power system kicks in immediately, no blips, no flips, and for about the next 20 minutes, the critical stuff continues to have power. So everything looks fine so far. Okay, as planned, the batteries get depleted, and now your backup emergency generator with the automatic transfer switch comes up. As it turns out, the backup generator did not service all the critical circuits somehow. Something had gotten changed in that facility, and I'll guarantee you that you've got this problem in many, many places. So there's my example of you're really not going to know it until you really test it. Okay, up at Greeley, up in Alaska, to include the adjacent, very important Missile Defense Agency asset, they unplugged for 5.5 hours. Now up there, they have lots of grid outages, and so they actually have an on-base power plant. Well, MIT Lincoln Labs guys said, you know what, guys? Guess what? Your on-base power plant is not going to function during this exercise. So we forced them. So we took them off the grid. We did not let them use their on-base power plant, which is what they normally use. They had to use their backup gensets, which they hardly ever use because they depend on the grid or the central plant. So a number of things happened there on their airfield. What they determined is that, what happened is the backup emergency genset up there actually was only powering the airfield lighting. It did not power the control tower. It did not provide electricity to hangars. There was a for real live exercise ongoing up there. There was a medevac helicopter in a hangar, and so again we had to immediately stop the exercise and re-energize the airfield circuit because the hangar doors could not be opened by hand. They're electrically controlled. So again, you're not going to know that unless you really test it. They also had comms, comm issues did not work. I think they had to end up using personal cell phones, so in any future exercise, we will pull the plug on personal cell phones and say no, personal cell phones are not going to function, those will be jammed. Okay, Fort Knox. Now, real congratulations here to Fort Knox. They had suffered a massive outage due to an ice storm. I think it was it was similar to what happened here at Redstone. So they had really, what they've done down there is really tremendous. They've got like 7 circuits serving Fort Knox, and through a focused effort over a number of years, essentially what they did is they put a generation asset at the switchgear for each of the 7 circuits. in parallel, they drilled for natural gas there, and they can produce enough natural gas to power all their critical facilities. So they had previously done 7 different exercises where they unplugged, but it was circuit by circuit, which is kind of a smart thing to do instead of just doing everything all at once. So they had done 7 preps, and they'd obviously learned along the way. Now, they did this themselves. Greeley and Stewart had MIT Lincoln Labs in there, courtesy of Secretary of Defense funding. And I actually was at Fort Knox during this with the local congressman, Congressman Guthrie, and Knox pulled it off themselves with no outside help, and essentially everything went fabulous. I think they had a stuck, the one issue I'm aware of is on one of the circuits they had a stuck switch. So what happened is they were not able to remotely close the switch, and so the generator on that switch did not come on. Now that circuit served one of the Army's 4 legacy data processing centers. That data processing center experienced no blips because its emergency backup generator and the up system kicked in as soon as the grid power was lost and the circuit generator could not come on. So really, congratulations for doing that. But again, until you do this stuff, you're not going to know what's up. So a couple themes that came out of this is installations, frankly, do not know what critical facilities they have, and therefore what the heck their critical loads are. At some of these installations, things that were very important did not have a backup generator. Things that were not important had a backup generator somehow. I mentioned the up system at Stewart. 75% of the gensets were loaded at 30% capacity and some only 10% capacity. So these emergency gensets were grossly oversized. And for those of you that know anything about diesel gensets, they're very unhappy when they're not fully loaded. They are extremely inefficient. They require more maintenance, and they will actually break. So they're not going to last very long if they're not properly loaded. And all these exercises, another outcome was great communications. Actually, since this had not been done, frankly, people on the installation that normally would not talk to people on the installation actually talked, and so lots of progress, was made there. Definitely issues with comm systems, discovered during all this. So we have another OSD-sponsored exercise at Fort Bragg that will happen in 2019. OSD is asking us right now for another candidate, and we're working with the Installation Management Command and the Army commands on that. My office is going to fund 1 or 2 additional exercises. I think this is a really good thing. I'm not going to keep funding this forever, but kind of my job is to kind of do some pilots and kind of show what needs to happen. And our sister military departments have not done any thus far. So the Army has really led the way on this. When this opportunity came up, there was some initial pushback within the Army, but luckily we persevered and made this happen, and really appreciate the Office of the Secretary of Defense's help and obviously MIT Lincoln Labs on this. Okay, so enough on that. Next, please. Is it lunchtime yet? Hey, so just a little shout out to the Office of Energy Initiatives. That happens to be a group that works for me. It's a fairly new office, been around 5 years. And what OEI is doing here, again, very complex map that is for your reference, but they are going after my favorite form of funding. It's called other people's money, okay? So this is not Army money. Now, we have to spend some money doing, to find the deals and National Environmental Policy Act stuff and real estate negotiations and things like that. But they've done, we've got 11 projects across the line. Their focus 5 years ago was renewables. Their focus now is resilience, quite frankly. So these are, so I'm going to give you 2 examples here. This office has brought about $630 million of project value to the Army. These are projects I would suggest the Army would not have $630 million to spend on. Okay, next please. So this is the premier Not all of our projects are this great, but this is the premier project. This is out on the island of Oahu. That was my, I had a number of very challenging assignments in my Navy days. This was my first place I was stationed at. I was actually down at Pearl Harbor. So this is a 50 megawatt biofuel project. It's located above the tsunami inundation zone. It's in the center of the island there. And, you know, so why the heck did this come together? Well, it turns out that Hawaiian Electric Company, the utility out there, needed more power during peak periods, number one. They also needed to be able to balance voltage and frequency issues because there's massive amounts of renewables going on out there. I think Hawaii has a goal of 100% renewable for their power by 2045. So this is a marriage that was brought together. So what the Army gave is a 35-year lease, 8 acres of land. We probably spent a couple $100,000 on the planning and the stuff like that, and that's it. What Hawaiian Electric did, obviously, this is a ratepayer-based project. That means, you know, HECO is charging the ratepayers over time to do this, of which the Army is a little bit of that. But they designed, built, constructed, maintain, and will operate this, you know, this plant. It will. Now, what's different here is this has enough power, enough electricity to provide 100% of the requirements for Schofield Barracks, what's called Field Station Kania, and the Wheeler Army Airfield up in the center of the island there. This project is black start capability. That means the central power plant can be started without any power from the grid. As I mentioned before, it's the only power plant. All the other power plants that HECO has are on the coast, and in the case of a tsunami, they would be definitely out of commission. They probably have some severe problems with sand that they'd have to get sand out of their plants before they could be started, and they all need power to start those big plants. So Hawaiian Electric Company, financed it, et cetera, and what we're getting then is, during a grid outage or a contingency situation, we get electricity from this plant for up to 30 days, and we pay the same electricity rate that we do now. No addition. Our peak load out there is 32 megawatts for everything. So there's actually some extra electricity that HECO could at their choosing, could wheel around. This project's been operational almost a year now. It went into operation in May of 2018. So neat project. Okay, next please. All right here at Redstone. So this is another OEI project. So this is again, enhanced use lease, land for a number of years. But this also involves a power purchase, a long-term power purchase arrangement. So this is a 10 megawatt, and this happens to be solar, and it's paired with a 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt hour battery storage system. All right, so it's right here in the middle of the Redstone installation. So obviously, since it's solar, it's a fuel. The fuel is free. The battery system really helps because we can store electricity, and when prices are really high, we can use it during that time of the day to provide some offset. So it provides some degree of resilience here. It would allow a future microgrid to be put in place. Now this one uses a lot of land since it's solar. Even though it's only 10 megawatts, only 10 megawatts, it's 114 acres. And it's paired with a 27-year power purchase agreement. So this provides enough power, in terms of homes, 2,500 homes. All right, next please. So that's two examples. So how the heck are we going to do this? So I got two things in closing. I'm going to tell you how we're going to attempt to do everything that I just spoke about, and I'm going to talk a little bit about operational energy, and we'll sort of end with another short film. So I'm displaying here four ways that I'm suggesting that we go about prosecuting these deficiencies that we find from our ongoing efforts. First of all, that you got the low cost, no cost solutions. That's really great. sorts of ways to do things. So we need to get our installation energy plans done. Do the smart energy things. I would suggest we need to keep doing the energy resilience exercises. By the way, a thought would be consider doing it circuit by circuit. I think that's a smart first way to do it before you just pull the plug on the whole installation. Appropriated funding. Military construction is something that we really need to think about. Actually, there was an ad in the FY19 appropriation for a microgrid at Fort Campbell, so that's really great. Energy Resilience Conservation Investment Program is a $150 million centrally funded OSD, so that's quote-unquote free to the Army, pot of money that we can use for these sorts of projects. A long time ago, that program was focused on efficiency, then its focus kind of changed to efficiency and renewable. I would suggest now it's laser focused on resilience. If OSD can get a bunch of really good resilience projects that support critical requirements, all the money is going to go to that. There'll be no money left over for renewable or efficiency. Those are going to have to get done other ways. Actually, the 19 appropriation plussed up this account by almost 50 million more. So Congress is very interested in this particular account. Third-party financing is again, historically been used, energy savings performance contracts, utility energy service contracts, historically been used for efficiency and cost-saving sorts of things. So my challenge to all the energy service companies out there and consultants that help them and everybody in the Army is please let's get focused on resilient sorts of things. If you're having trouble thinking about what the heck that means, I'll give you two ideas. Go after the backup gen set issue that we have. Don't try to do a whole installation. Pick out one part of an installation, one circuit, and let's see if we can pencil out taking 30 backup gen sets and tying them together and ending up with 15 and trying to put a microgrid kind of thing in place. You're going to get better better delivery of electricity. If one genset goes out, that facility doesn't go down because you have more gensets tied together and things like that. My other idea would be combined heat and power, specifically micro combined heat and power. I think there's lots of opportunities out there, to do that. These third-party financing deals are actually budget neutral. It's a special statutory authority. So please keep doing that. I would suggest utilities privatization is another area that actually contributes to resilience. That's not the primary focus, but you've got to have your pipes and wires that functioning for power to be moved around and work and things like that. And then of course we've got the private financing, the examples I just gave you. Okay, real quickly. So we'll go to the next one. I've got another little clip here. So besides installations, the other focus with respect to energy is operational energy. So that's again energy, water, sustainability considerations. Now more applied to the soldier, to tactical vehicles, to weapon systems. So obviously, resupplying deployed troops is not easy. Transporting fuel and water to forward operating bases places people in harm's way. I am told in Iraq and Afghanistan, fuel and water were 80% of the tonnage in a long and very contested supply chain, and unfortunately there were lots of injuries and deaths with folks involved in that. So I've got a short video here that's going to put a little focus on operational energy, and then I will stop. Go ahead.
Modern concepts of warfare have compelled today's Army to seek greater and greater mechanization, movement, and dispersal of combat forces. Yet it's a sad fact of life that the greater the mechanization, the greater the consumption of petroleum fuel. The inescapable conclusion is that the difficulty of maintaining fuel supplies in a combat theater may halt our ground forces far more effectively than any action taken by the enemy.
What was true in 1963 is just as true today. In Iraq and Afghanistan, fuel and water were 80% of the tonnage in a long and contested supply chain. This chain tethers forward deployed forces all the way back to the port of entry, with vulnerabilities at every point along the way. When we reduce the amount of fuel a unit needs to operate, we reduce the need to resupply. This could save lives along the supply route, while extending a unit's range, flexibility, mobility, and freedom of action. Army planners outline a future where units operate in a complex and lethal battle space for up to 7 days between resupply. The Army's investments in operational energy technology strike a balance between capability and consumption, ensuring combat vehicles have the necessary horsepower for mobility, plus all the electrical power they need to enable modern combat operations, mission command, and force protection systems. But reaching that 7-day goal will require as much as a 30% reduction in demand for water, ammunition, and fuel. So how do we get there? New equipment and upgrades are going to dramatically improve efficiency. For example, the M1A2 Abrams main battle tank will soon have an upgraded auxiliary power unit to support current and future power demands, while reducing fuel consumption at low idle by around 90%. Improvements to the main Abrams engine will ultimately reduce fuel consumption by an additional 20%, extending its range. The improved turbine engine for Black Hawk and Apache helicopters improves fuel efficiency and capability. This new engine will reduce fuel consumption by up to 25% and enable the aircraft to fly higher, longer, and in hotter temperatures, while reducing maintenance costs by up to 35%. The new upgraded M109 Paladin self-propelled howitzer shares a chassis and drivetrain with the Bradley fighting vehicle, allowing the gun to keep pace with the units it supports. It also includes a 70-kilowatt high-voltage generator, which provides enough electrical power to allow the replacement of the gun's hydraulic azimuth and elevation components with electric motors, simplifying maintenance and making the gun more accurate and more lethal. Other technologies like smart generators, tactical microgrids, and vehicle-to-grid power will reduce fuel consumption and simplify providing electricity to tactical operations centers and base camps. But equipment won't do it all. Just like the estimated mileage on a new car sales sticker, real-world results depend on how you drive. You can make a difference by operating Army equipment more efficiently to avoid wasting fuel. While it's tempting to leave your engine running so you can be ready to move at a moment's notice, it's not necessary. Remember, an idling vehicle not only gets 0 miles per gallon, it wastes valuable fuel you might need later. For example, the M915 line haul tractor consumes 1 gallon of fuel per hour while idling, and the M1A2 Abrams currently uses more than 13 gallons per hour at idle. But idling just about any vehicle for longer than 15 seconds uses more fuel than restarting the engine. If you're going to be stopped for more than a few minutes, turn off the engine. It's a simple step that could mean the difference between mission success and failure. Being aware of the energy you use, whether it's fuel in your vehicle, fuel in your generator, or the batteries in your radios and night vision goggles, is the first step in reducing the demand for energy on the battlefield.
Epitaph for an unsuccessful operation. Out of gas. It's an epitaph that must not be written.
Operational energy is a challenge we faced in 1963, a challenge we face today, and will continue to face in the future. But working together, we can maximize the effective use of fuel, reduce risk, and enable combat formations to travel farther and fight longer. You can learn more about operational energy planning and tactical power management at the Mill Suite Collaboration site. Operational energy is the power we need to win.
All right, hey, I hope you found that interesting. My folks found a 1960s film that was actually part of that they took apart and kind of updated it. So hopefully I've given you enough factoids and stories and talked a little bit about policy, about that pivot to resilience. There's lots of smart folks here in the Army, you know, all around the place, but we don't have all the ideas, so I always like to come to settings like this and tell the story. So I'm looking for help from everybody out there, especially companies, consultants, et cetera. Occasionally, my office will host what I call an industry outreach. We did the last one a couple months ago, so just pay attention to that. We use the Office of Energy Initiatives Twitter feed and their Facebook to kind of announce those. So I would welcome you at that. So again, really appreciate the opportunity. I know I've gone over time here. If it's okay, I will see if there's any quick questions, if that's okay. Just a couple minutes. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, do you have any guidance on how an installation might best design a resilience strategy using multiple sources of funding? For example, an EUL plus a VBA or an ESPC plus a VBA.
I don't think I have a lock on that market, but for big projects using other people's money, I would suggest get a hold of the Office of Energy Initiatives. That's the central expertise on these big deals involving enhanced use leases and really complicated power purchase agreements. The Army can only buy electricity for up to 10 years. Anything beyond that, we have to go to OSD on. To get their okay. So that's just a complexity. I don't need 156 installations to understand that. That's kind of why we have OEI. On a lot of the rest of your stuff, I would challenge your energy service company through an ESPC or UESC to kind of bring home the bacon on resilience. And obviously, I would think we would want to combine these very important things that don't have much of a payback with some quick payback items to make them work. Now, the best way is if we can get, if we can't get other people's money, the next place to go would be to, whatever kind of appropriated funding we can get. You've got military construction, you've got the URSA, you've got the sustainment and restoration, the R&M sorts of funds that are available. But I know those are in very high demand. So therefore, as long as they're good ideas, they're not too risky, third-party financing. Okay? Yes?
Where do we stand on using resilience as part of the savings of cost avoidance for ESPC?
Okay, using resilience with respect to cost savings. That's not ever, nobody's figured that out yet. I don't know if, I have not figured it out either. So I know people are working on that, but the ESPC UESC statute is about saving energy and having an economical payback based on reduced energy or reduced operations and maintenance. So nobody's gotten there yet, unfortunately. Anything else? All right. Hey, again, I apologize for going over time here, but whenever I get the opportunity to talk about the Army energy story, I have fun at it. So really appreciate it, and I'll be around here for a little bit. Have a good rest of your summit conference here, and contact me or anybody on my staff for any kind of future thoughts or questions that you have. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Hey, sir, before you get off the stage, we just want to give you a small token of our appreciation for your attending the summit here this week. And this is a commander's coin from the Huntsville Engineering and Support Center. So on behalf of Colonel John Hurley, thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Mr. Suresh, and thanks to everybody. It's time now for our break and our network, and don't forget that at the end of the break, we have breakout sessions over here. We'll be back for the panel here in a few minutes. We'll kind of let you know since we're off time, so let's go enjoy the break and visit our vendor.